Jake Murphy pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and watched the alien world grow larger below him. The planet Kepler 442b looked nothing like Earth. Strange purple forests covered most of the land, and 3 moons hung in the pale green sky. He had dreamed of this moment for months, but now that it was happening, his stomach felt tight with worry. The ship landed with a soft thud at the Zephyrian Naval Academy spaceport. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers toward the exit. The air outside smelled different, like metal and flowers mixed together. The gravity felt lighter than Earth, making each step feel like he might float away. A tall creature waited for him at the landing platform. It looked like a giant insect walking on 2 legs with 4 arms and large black eyes. Its skin was dark blue and shiny like armor. This was his first real look at a Zephyrian, and Jake tried not to stare. "You are Jake Murphy from Earth," the creature said in perfect English, though its voice buzzed like a bee. "I am Commander Zethnoke. Welcome to our academy." Jake nodded and shook the alien's hand, which felt cold and smooth. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored to be here." The commander's eyes studied him carefully. "You are smaller than I expected. Earth humans are supposed to be warriors from a death world, but you look quite ordinary." Jake did not know what to say to that. Back home in Montana, he was considered pretty average. He stood about 6 feet tall, with brown hair and the kind of build that came from working on his family's ranch. He had never thought of himself as a warrior. They walked through the academy grounds, and Jake saw his new home for the next year. The buildings were made of white stone that seemed to glow in the alien sunlight. Strange plants with silver leaves grew everywhere, and the paths were covered with smooth blue stones that felt warm under his feet. Other students moved around the campus, and Jake realized he was seeing species he had only read about in books. The Zephyrians were the most common, but he also saw creatures that looked like walking crystals and others that seemed to be made of moving gas in clear containers. "The other 2 humans arrived yesterday," Commander Zethnoke explained as they walked. "Lisa Brooks and Ryan Cole, they are waiting for you in the dormitory." Jake felt relief wash over him. He had been worried about being alone among so many aliens. The 3 humans had trained together on Earth for 6 months, preparing for this exchange program. They knew each other well, and Jake was glad he would have familiar faces around him. The dormitory was a tall building with many floors. Jake's room was on the 3rd level, and he was surprised to find it was quite nice. 2 beds, 2 desks, and a large window that looked out over the academy grounds. One bed was already taken, with strange objects scattered on the desk nearby. "Your roommate is Klixvar," the commander said. "He is a good student, though he asks many questions. He has never met a human before." Jake set his bag on the empty bed and looked around. The room felt bigger than his dorm back at college on Earth, but somehow less comfortable. Everything was designed for alien bodies, and nothing looked quite right. "The other humans are in the common room on this floor," Commander Zethnoke continued. "You should meet them now. Classes begin tomorrow, and you will need to be ready." Jake thanked the commander and went to find his fellow humans. The common room was easy to locate by the sound of familiar voices speaking English. He pushed open the door and saw Lisa and Ryan sitting on strange furniture that looked like it was made for insects. "Jake!" Lisa jumped up and gave him a quick hug. She was a small woman with red hair and bright green eyes. Back on Earth, she had been the top of their training class in alien languages. "How was the trip?" "Long," Jake replied, sitting down carefully on what he hoped was a chair. "This place is incredible. I can't believe we're actually here." Ryan Cole was sprawled across another piece of furniture, looking relaxed despite the strange surroundings. He was tall and thin, with black hair and the kind of easy smile that made people trust him. "Wait until you see the other students," he said. "Some of them are really weird looking, but they seem nice enough." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Ryan, you can't call them weird. We're the weird ones here. We're the aliens." Jake looked around the common room. Everything was built for creatures, with different body shapes than humans. The furniture was wrong, the lighting was too bright, and the air felt too thin. For the first time, he really understood that he was very far from home. Have you met any of the other students yet? Jake asked. A few, Lisa said. They're all very polite, but I can tell they're curious about us. Some of them seem scared, which is strange. I mean, look at us, we're not exactly frightening, Ryan laughed. That's because you haven't heard what they're saying about us. I picked up some of their conversations with the translation device. They call us Deathworlders and think we're some kind of savage warriors because we come from such a dangerous planet. Jake thought about that. Earth did have a lot of dangerous animals and harsh weather, but it was just home to him. He had never considered himself particularly tough or dangerous. What do they think we're going to do? Probably eat them, Ryan said with a grin. Did you know that most of these species evolved on planets where the biggest predator was about the size of a house cat? They think Earth is like some kind of nightmare world where everything is trying to kill everything else. Lisa looked worried. We need to be careful not to do anything that might scare them. This exchange program is important for Earth's relationship with the Galactic Federation. We can't mess it up. Before Jake could respond, the door opened and a Zephyrian entered. This one was smaller than Commander Zethnoke, with lighter blue skin and more delicate features. Its forearms moved in a nervous pattern as it approached them. Excuse me, the creature said in buzzing English. I am Klixvar. I believe I am to be roommate with Jake Murphy. Jake stood up and smiled. That's me. Nice to meet you, Klixvar. The alien's large black eyes studied Jake carefully. You are smaller than I expected. The stories about humans say you are giants who can tear metal with your bare hands. Ryan burst out laughing. Where did you hear that? Klixvar's antenna twitched with what might have been embarrassment. There are many stories about your species. Some say you come from a world so dangerous that you had to become predators to survive. Others say you can see in complete darkness and hear sounds from miles away. A few even claim you can survive in the vacuum of space without protection. Jake shook his head. I'm afraid we're much more boring than that. We're just regular people who happen to come from a planet with some tough weather. But it is true that your world has large predators? Klixvar asked. Creatures that hunt and kill for food? Well, yes, Jake admitted. We have bears, wolves, mountain lions, and things like that. But they mostly leave people alone if you know how to behave around them. Klixvar's eyes grew even. Wider. You know how to behave around predators? You have met them? Jake thought about the times he had encountered bears while hiking, or the mountain lion that had wandered onto their ranch last summer. Sure, a few times. You just need to stay calm and not run. Most predators won't bother you if you don't act like prey? The alien made a sound that might have been amazement or terror. This is why the instructors are concerned about your advanced xenobiology class. Professor Thane Cole teaches with live specimens, including some very dangerous creatures. Many students have been injured over the years. Lisa leaned forward with interest. What kind of dangerous creatures? Klixvar's antenna drooped. Predators. From death worlds like yours? The final exam involves observing a shadow beast from Krylos 7. It is considered one of the most dangerous courses at the academy. Jake felt a flutter of excitement rather than fear. He had always been good with animals, even difficult ones. Back home, he was the one who dealt with the ornery bulls and spooked horses. How different could alien animals be? When does that? Class start? He asked. Next week, Klixvar replied. I hope you humans are as tough as the stories say. You are going to need it. The first week at the academy passed quickly for Jake. He attended classes on space navigation, alien cultures, and military strategy alongside students from dozens of different worlds. Most of the alien cadets kept their distance from the three humans, watching them with curious but cautious eyes. Jake found the academic work challenging but manageable. The real difficulty was adjusting to daily life among beings so different from himself. The food was strange, the furniture uncomfortable, and the social customs confusing. But slowly, he began to understand his new environment. His roommate Klixvar proved to be helpful and friendly, though he asked endless questions about Earth and human behavior. The young Zephyrian seemed fascinated by stories of human interaction with dangerous animals, treating Jake's casual mentions of camping trips and ranch work like tales of incredible heroism. You really walked among wild bears? Kliksvar would ask, his antenna twitching with excitement. They weren't wild, Jake would explain patiently. They were just bears doing bear things. You leave them alone, they leave you alone. This concept seemed to puzzle most of the alien students. In their experience, predators were to be avoided at all costs or dealt with using advanced technology and heavy weapons. The idea of coexisting with dangerous creatures was completely foreign to them. On Monday of the second week, Jake finally attended his first advanced xenobiology class. The classroom was unlike anything he had ever seen. Built like a large amphitheater, it had rows of seats arranged in a circle around a central area. The center was surrounded by thick transparent walls that reached up to the ceiling, creating a massive containment area. Professor Thane Cole stood at the front of the class, his crystalline body glowing softly in the artificial light. He was one of the Vorthan, a species that looked like walking sculptures made of living crystal. His voice resonated like wind chimes when he spoke. Welcome to Advanced Xenobiology, the professor began. This course will expose you to the most dangerous life forms in our galaxy. Many of you will find the material disturbing. Some of you may not complete the course. Jake looked around at his fellow students. There were about 30 cadets in the class, representing a dozen different species. The three humans sat together near the back, while the alien students clustered in groups based on their species. Today we will observe our first specimen, Professor Thane Cole continued. Before we begin, I must remind you of the safety protocols. Never approach the containment area. Never attempt to touch the barriers. Never make sudden movements or loud noises. The energy fields are powerful, but they are not perfect. The professor moved to a control panel and pressed several buttons. The floor of the containment area began to rise, revealing a hidden chamber beneath. Jake leaned forward with interest, curious to see what kind of creature they would be studying. What emerged made most of the alien students gasp and move back in their seats. It was a massive creature, easily 8 feet tall and covered in black fur that seemed to absorb light. Its body was muscular and powerful, built like a cross between a bear and a wolf. 4 legs supported its weight, each ending in claws that looked like they could cut through steel, but the most striking feature was its eyes. They glowed with a cold blue light, scanning the room with obvious intelligence. This was not some mindless beast, but a thinking predator that was evaluating its surroundings and the creatures watching it. This is a Krillian shadow beast, Professor Thane Cole explained. It comes from the death world of Krelos 7, where the gravity is 3 times galactic standard and the atmosphere is toxic to most life forms. It is considered one of the most dangerous predators in known space. The creature moved with fluid grace around the containment area, its claws clicking. On the metal floor, Jake noticed that it was testing the barriers, pressing against them gently to gauge their strength. The beast was smart, gathering information about its prison. The shadow beast evolved to hunt in complete darkness, the professor continued. It can see heat signatures, hear heartbeats from great distances, and track prey across continents. Its claws can cut through most materials, and its bite can crush bone. Several alien students made nervous sounds. Jake saw a group of Zephyrians huddled together, their antennae twitching with fear. Even the normally confident Vorthan cadets seemed uncomfortable, but Jake found himself fascinated rather than frightened. The creature reminded him of the large predators he had encountered on Earth, but magnified and enhanced. He could see the intelligence in its movements, the way it was studying each student in turn. The shadow beast is also remarkably intelligent, Professor Thane Cole went on. It can solve complex problems, remember faces, and even show emotions. This makes it both more dangerous and more interesting to study. The creature suddenly stopped its pacing and turned to look directly at Jake, its glowing eyes locked onto his, and for a moment neither moved. Jake felt like he was being evaluated, measured by an alien intelligence that was trying to understand what he was. Instead of looking away, Jake maintained eye contact. Back home, he had learned that showing fear to a predator was often a mistake. You had to project confidence even if you did not feel it. The shadow beast tilted its head slightly as if puzzled by this human's behavior, Interesting, Professor Thane Cole observed. The specimen seems to have taken notice of our human exchange student. Shadow beasts are known to react strongly to fear responses, but this one appears curious rather than aggressive. The other students turned to stare at Jake, who was still maintaining eye contact with the creature. He could feel their amazement and confusion. Most of them had never seen anyone look directly at a predator without showing fear. "Can you tell us what you are thinking, Cadet Murphy?" the professor asked. Jake considered the question carefully. "It's studying us the same way we're studying it. It's trying to figure out what we are and whether we're a threat. It's not just a mindless killing machine." The shadow beast made a low sound, not quite a growl but not friendly either. It moved closer to the barrier near Jake, its massive head only a few feet away from the human student. "Fascinating," Professor Thane Cole said. "In 3 years of using this specimen for classes, I have never seen it show such interest in a student. Usually, it either ignores the observers or displays aggressive behavior toward those who show fear." Jake noticed something else about the creature's behavior. It was pacing in a pattern, always returning to the same spot near the barrier. Its movements were becoming more agitated, and it was breathing harder than when it first appeared. "Professor," Jake said quietly, "I think it's stressed. The lights are too bright, there are too many of us watching it, and the space is too small. It's like a caged animal at a zoo." The alien students murmured among themselves. The idea of considering a predator's emotional state was foreign to most of them. In their cultures, dangerous creatures were either avoided or destroyed, not studied for their feelings. "An interesting observation," the professor replied. "How would you suggest we reduce its stress level?" Jake thought about the times he had dealt with frightened animals on the ranch. Fewer people, dimmer lights, and more space would help. Also, it keeps looking toward that corner of the containment area. Maybe it wants to hide. Professor Thane Cole made some adjustments to the lighting, and the harsh white light became softer and more natural. The shadow beast immediately relaxed slightly, its pacing becoming less frantic. "Remarkable," the professor said. "Cadet Murphy, you seem to have an unusual understanding of predator behavior. Have you studied xenobiology before?" "No, sir," Jake replied, "but I've worked with animals most of my life. They're not so different from each other, no matter what planet they come from." The shadow beast had settled into a more relaxed posture, though it continued to watch Jake with obvious interest. The other students seemed amazed by this development. "This is why the exchange program is valuable," Professor Thane Cole announced. "Different species bring different perspectives to our studies. We will observe how our understanding of this specimen changes with these new insights." As the class continued, Jake found himself more and more interested in the shadow beast. It was clearly intelligent, possibly more so than many of the species he had met at the academy. But unlike the civilized aliens around him, it was still wild, still connected to its predatory nature. When the class ended, the shadow beast was returned to its holding area beneath the floor. As it disappeared from view, it looked back at Jake one last time, as if remembering his face. "That was incredible," Lisa whispered as they left the classroom. "I've never seen anything like it." Ryan nodded in agreement. "The way it looked at you, Jake, it was like it was trying to talk to you." Jake thought about the creature's intelligent eyes and careful behavior. "Maybe it was," he said quietly. "Maybe it was." 3 days after their first encounter with the shadow beast, Jake and his classmates returned to the xenobiology laboratory. Professor Thane Cole had announced that today would be a more detailed study of predator behavior with a focus on hunting patterns and territorial instincts. The amphitheater was packed with even more students than usual. Word had spread throughout the academy about the human who had stared down a shadow beast without flinching. Cadets from other classes had come to watch, filling the upper rows of seats with curious onlookers. Jake felt uncomfortable with all the attention. He sat between Lisa and Ryan, trying to ignore the whispers and stares from the alien students. Many of them pointed at him with various appendages, speaking in their native languages about the strange human who was not afraid of predators. "I heard that shadow beasts can smell fear from miles away," one Zephyrian cadet buzzed to another. But the human shows no fear at all. Perhaps the stories about their species are true. Professor Thane Cole entered the laboratory carrying a collection of instruments and scanning devices. His crystalline body reflected the lights in the room, creating dancing patterns on the walls as he moved. "Today we will conduct a more comprehensive study of our specimen," he announced. "We will observe its hunting instincts, test its problem-solving abilities, and document its territorial behaviors. This will require us to interact with the creature in ways that are more stimulating than simple observation." The professor began setting up various pieces of equipment around the containment area. Jake noticed that some of the devices were designed to project sounds and scents into the creature's environment, while others would monitor its vital signs and brain activity. The shadow beast has been kept in minimal stimulation for the past week, Professor Thane Cole continued. Today we will activate its hunting instincts by introducing simulated prey behaviors. This will allow us to observe how it thinks and plans its attacks. Jake frowned at this announcement. He had spent enough time around animals to know that artificially stimulating their hunting instincts could be dangerous. A calm predator was manageable, but one that was actively hunting was an entirely different matter. The shadow beast was brought up from its holding area, and Jake immediately noticed the difference in its behavior. The creature looked more alert than before, its glowing eyes scanning the room with increased intensity. Its muscles were tense, ready for action. "As you can see, the specimen is already responding to the presence of more observers," the professor noted. Shadow beasts are highly social predators that hunt in packs in their natural environment. The increased activity around it is triggering its pack hunting instincts. The creature began pacing with more purpose, its claws clicking rhythmically on the floor. Jake watched its movements and felt a growing sense of unease. The shadow beast was not just alert, it was agitated. The stimulation was having a stronger effect than the professor had intended. Professor Thane Cole activated the first set of devices, and sounds began echoing through the containment area. They were recordings of small animals, the kind that would be natural prey for a shadow beast. The creature's response was immediate and dramatic. The shadow beast dropped into a hunting crouch, its entire body focused on the sounds. Its breathing became deeper and more controlled, and the glow in its eyes intensified. This was no longer a curious animal observing its surroundings, but a predator preparing to kill. "Excellent response," the professor said, making notes on his instruments. "The hunting instincts are fully activated. Now we will test its problem-solving abilities." More devices activated, creating moving shadows and light patterns that simulated fleeing prey. The shadow beast began stalking these illusions, its movements becoming more predatory and focused. Jake could see that the creature was becoming increasingly frustrated as it tried to catch prey that was not really there. "Professor," Jake said quietly, "I think you should stop the simulation. The creature is getting too worked up." Professor Thane Cole glanced at him with surprise. "The containment barriers are more than sufficient, Cadet Murphy. The specimen cannot harm us." But Jake was watching the shadow beast's behavior with growing concern. The creature was no longer just hunting, it was becoming desperate. Its movements were more erratic, and it was starting to test the barriers more aggressively than before. The alien students seemed fascinated by the display. They had never seen such a perfect example of predatory behavior, and they watched with the detached interest of scientists observing a laboratory experiment. Jake saw something they missed. The shadow beast was not just a specimen to be studied, it was a living creature being driven to distraction by artificial stimulation. "The creature's stress levels are rising beyond safe parameters," Jake said more urgently. "In my experience, when a predator gets this frustrated, it starts looking for any way to release that energy." Professor Thane Cole was too focused on his instruments to pay attention to Jake's warning. He increased the intensity of the simulation, making the sounds and movements more realistic. The shadow beast responded by throwing itself against the barriers with increasing force. "Magnificent," the professor breathed. "Look at the power and determination. This is why shadow beasts are such successful predators." But Jake was no longer watching the creature with scientific interest. He was watching it with the eye of someone who understood animal behavior, and what he saw terrified him. The shadow beast was beyond frustrated now. It was enraged. The artificial hunting scenario was driving it into a state of predatory fury. The first sign of trouble came when the lights in the laboratory began to flicker. The Academy's power grid was old and not always reliable, especially when multiple systems were drawing energy at the same time. The containment barriers required enormous amounts of power to maintain, and the simulation equipment was adding to that demand. "Professor," Jake said, standing up from his seat, "the power is fluctuating. You need to shut down the simulation now." But it was too late. The shadow beast had noticed the flickering lights and the slight variations in the barrier's strength. Its predatory instincts had evolved to notice the smallest weakness in any defense, and it was already testing the barriers with systematic precision. The creature threw itself against one section of the containment field, and sparks flew from the power couplings. The alien students began to murmur nervously, but Professor Thane-Cole was still focused on his readings. "The data we are collecting is unprecedented," he said excitedly. "This level of predatory behavior has never been recorded before." Jake was no longer listening to the professor. He was watching the shadow beast probe the barriers with the methodical intelligence of a creature that had evolved to escape from any trap. The beast had found the weakest point in the containment field, and was focusing all its attacks there. The power fluctuations became more severe, and the laboratory lights began to dim. Emergency systems activated, but they were designed to handle normal power failures, not the massive energy drain of a xenobiology containment system under attack. "The barriers are failing," Jake shouted over the increasing noise of sparking electronics. "Everyone needs to evacuate now." But the alien students were frozen in their seats, staring at the shadow beast with a mixture of fascination and terror. They had never seen anything like this before, and they did not understand the danger they were in. The shadow beast sensed the weakening barriers and increased its attacks. Its claws found purchase on the edges of the energy field, and it began to tear at the containment system with systematic determination. "Impossible," Professor Thane-Cole said, finally looking up from his instruments. "The barriers are rated for creatures twice this size and strength." Jake was already moving toward the exit, grabbing Lisa and Ryan as he passed. "The barriers were designed for a calm specimen, not one that's been artificially stimulated into a hunting frenzy," he called back to the professor. The shadow beast let out a roar that shook the entire laboratory. It was a sound of pure predatory rage, the call of a hunter that had been denied its prey for too long. The creature gathered itself for one final assault on the weakening barriers. With a sound like breaking glass, the containment field collapsed. Sparks flew in all directions as the energy projectors overloaded and shut down. The shadow beast stood in the center of the amphitheater, free for the first time in years. For a moment, everything was silent. The creature stood perfectly still, as if it could not believe that it was finally free. Then its glowing eyes swept the room, taking in the dozens of potential prey animals that surrounded it. The alien students finally understood their danger. Panic erupted throughout the amphitheater as creatures scrambled for the exits. The Zephyrians' wings buzzed frantically as they tried to fly, while the Vorthan cadets' crystalline bodies chimed in terror. The gaseous Nethys simply fled through the air vents, but their flight responses only triggered the shadow beast's hunting instincts further. This was exactly what the creature had been programmed by evolution to respond to. Moving prey meant food, and it had been a very long time since the shadow beast had eaten anything that fought back. The creature leaped toward the fleeing students, its massive claws extended and ready to strike. Its target was a group of Zephyrian cadets. Jake saw the shadow beast leap toward the group of terrified Zephyrian cadets. Time seemed to slow down as he watched the massive predator sail through the air, its claws extended and ready to kill. The alien students were stumbling over each other in their panic, their wings buzzing frantically as they tried to escape. Without thinking, Jake did something that went against every survival instinct known to galactic civilization. Instead of running away from the danger, he ran toward it. Jake, no! Lisa screamed behind him, but he was already moving. Jake sprinted down the steps of the amphitheater, jumping over fallen equipment and scattered alien students. His mind was clear and focused, processing the situation with the calm efficiency he had learned from years of dealing with dangerous animals on his family's ranch. The shadow beast was still in the air when Jake reached the bottom of the amphitheater. He could see the creature's trajectory and knew exactly where it would land. More importantly, he could see the slight favor it was showing to its right side, a subtle weakness that most observers would miss. Jake had noticed this during their first class together. The shadow beast always turned to the right first when it changed direction, and it put slightly more weight on its left front leg. It was a small thing, probably the result of an old injury, but it was the kind of detail that could make the difference between life and death. The shadow beast landed among the Zephyrian cadets with a sound like thunder. Its massive claws scraped against the floor as it regained its balance, and its glowing eyes locked onto the closest target. One of the young aliens had fallen during the panic and was lying helpless on the ground. Jake was still 20 feet away. When the creature raised its claw for the killing blow, he would never reach the fallen cadet in time, but he could do something else. Something that would violate every rule of predator safety he had ever learned. "Hey!" Jake shouted at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing through the laboratory. "Over here." The shadow beast froze, its claw still raised. Slowly, it turned its massive head toward Jake, its glowing eyes narrowing with confusion. In all its years of hunting, nothing had ever called out to it like this. Prey ran away or hid. They did not announce their presence to a predator. Jake stood perfectly still, his arms relaxed at his sides. He made no threatening gestures, but he also showed no fear. His breathing was steady and controlled, and he maintained direct eye contact with the creature. "That's right," Jake said in a calm, steady voice. "Look at me. I'm the one you want." The shadow beast released the fallen Zephyrian cadet and turned its full attention to Jake. It dropped into a hunting crouch, its muscles coiled for another leap. This strange creature was obviously the leader of the local pack, and killing it would establish dominance over all the others, but something was wrong. The human showed none of the fear responses that the shadow beast was programmed to exploit. There was no rapid heartbeat, no scent of terror, no trembling or preparation for flight. Instead, the creature radiated a calm confidence that was completely foreign to the shadow beast's experience. Jake began to move forward, taking slow, deliberate steps toward the massive predator. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run, but he forced himself to maintain his calm demeanor. This was like approaching a spooked bull, he told himself. Show fear, and you die. Show confidence, and you might live. "Easy there," Jake said softly, his voice carrying the same tone he used to calm frightened horses. "Nobody needs to get hurt. Here, you're just scared and confused, aren't you?" The shadow beast tilted its head, clearly puzzled by this unprecedented behavior. It had hunted thousands of creatures across dozens of worlds, but it had never encountered anything like this. Human. The creature's pack instincts were telling it that this was an alpha predator, but its eyes were telling it that this was just another prey animal. Jake was now within 10 feet of the shadow beast, close enough to smell its wild scent and feel the heat radiating from its powerful body. The creature could kill him with a single swipe of its claws, but Jake continued to project calm confidence. "You don't really want to hurt anyone," Jake continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're just frustrated because you've been locked up for so long. I understand that. I've seen it before with animals back home." The shadow beast's breathing began to slow slightly. The human's calm presence was having an effect on its agitated state. In the wild, the creature lived in a complex social hierarchy, where dominance was established through confidence and body language rather than violence. This human was displaying all the markers of a superior predator. Behind Jake, the alien students watched in absolute silence. They had never seen anything like this in their lives. By all the laws of biology and common sense, Jake should have been dead already. Instead, he was having what looked like a conversation with one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Professor Thane-Cole stood frozen at his control panel, his crystalline body flickering with amazement. In all his years of studying predator behavior, he had never witnessed anything like this. The readings from his instruments were beyond anything in the scientific literature. The shadow beast took a step forward, bringing it within arm's reach of Jake. The creature's massive head was now level with Jake's chest, and he could see his own reflection in its glowing eyes. One wrong move would mean instant death, but Jake had spent his entire life around animals, and he could read the subtle signs of the shadow beast's mood. The creature was no longer hunting. It was evaluating, trying to understand what Jake was, and where he fit in the natural order. "You're not a mindless killer," Jake said softly, slowly raising his hand toward the creature's head. "You're intelligent. You're curious. You're just trying to figure out what's going on." The shadow beast watched Jake's hand approach with intense focus. Every muscle in its body was ready to strike if this proved to be an attack. But the human's movements were slow and non-threatening, more like a greeting than an assault. Jake's hand made contact with the fur on the creature's head just behind its ears. The shadow beast flinched slightly at the touch, but it did not pull away. The human's hand was warm and gentle, completely unlike anything the creature had expected. "See?" Jake whispered. "You're not so different from the animals back home. You just want to be understood." The shadow beast's eyes began to lose their predatory glow. The creature was experiencing something it had never felt before, a sense of connection with another intelligent being. In the wild, shadow beasts were pack animals that formed strong social bonds. But this one had been alone for years. Suddenly, the creature's head snapped up. Its attention focused on something beyond Jake. The human turned to see what had caught the shadow beast's interest and felt his blood turn cold. Ryan had been trying to help evacuate the other students, but he had moved too quickly. His sudden motion had triggered the shadow beast's hunting instincts, and the creature's predatory focus was now locked onto him. The shadow beast tensed to leap, its moment of calm shattered by the sight of fleeing prey. All of Jake's progress was about to be undone by a single careless movement. Without thinking, Jake did the most dangerous thing he could possibly do. He stepped directly in front of the shadow beast, blocking its path to Ryan. The creature's leap would have to go through him to reach its target. "No," Jake said firmly, his voice carrying absolute authority. "He's under my protection." The shadow beast collided with Jake at full force, its massive weight carrying both of them to the ground. They rolled across the floor in a tangle of limbs and claws, the creature's hunting instincts warring with its growing recognition of Jake as a pack leader. Jake wrapped his arms around the shadow beast's neck, using his weight and leverage to control the creature's movements. It was like wrestling with a bear, but Jake had done that before during his ranch work. The key was to stay calm and use the animal's own momentum against it. "Easy," Jake grunted, maintaining his grip despite the creature's struggles. "Easy there. Nobody's going to hurt you." The shadow beast gradually stopped struggling, its breathing heavy but controlled. Jake maintained his hold, speaking softly to the creature as he would to any frightened animal. Slowly, the predator began to relax, when Jake finally released his grip and rolled away. The shadow beast did not attack. Instead, it sat back on its haunches and regarded him with what looked like respect. The creature had found something it had been missing for years, a connection with another intelligent being who understood its nature. The laboratory was absolutely silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. Alien students stared in amazement at the human who had just wrestled a shadow beast into submission with nothing but his bare hands and calm confidence. Jake stood up slowly, keeping his eyes on the creature. The shadow beast watched him but made no aggressive moves. The moment of greatest danger had passed, and both human and predator understood that something fundamental had changed between them. "Good," Jake said softly, backing away from the creature. "Very good. You're going to be okay." The shadow beast tilted its head and made a low sound that was almost like a purr. For the first time in years, it was not alone. The silence in the laboratory stretched on for what felt like hours. Jake stood motionless, his eyes still locked with the shadow beast's glowing gaze. The creature sat calmly on its haunches, showing no signs of the predatory rage that had driven it to break free from its containment just minutes before. Slowly, the alien students began to emerge from their hiding places. They moved with extreme caution, their various forms of locomotion creating whispered sounds as they crept closer to witness this impossible scene. A human had just subdued one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators with nothing but his bare hands and calm words. Professor Thankol was the first to approach, his crystalline body flickering with amazement and confusion. His instruments were still recording, capturing data that would revolutionize the field of xenobiology. But the readings made no sense according to current scientific understanding. "This is impossible," the professor whispered, his voice chiming like broken glass. "Shadow beasts cannot be domesticated. They are apex predators with no natural social behaviors toward other species." Jake kept his voice low and steady, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace he had established with the creature. "It's not domesticated, Professor. It's just not afraid anymore, and neither am I." The shadow beast's head turned toward the professor, and Jake saw its muscles tense slightly. The creature was still on edge, still ready to defend itself if threatened. But its focus remained primarily on Jake, recognizing him as the leader of this strange new pack. "Everyone stay back," Jake said quietly. "It's calm now, but it's still a wild animal. Don't make any sudden movements or loud noises." Klicksvar stepped forward carefully, his antenna twitching with nervous energy. "How did you know what to do?" he asked in his buzzing voice. "Our military training teaches us to retreat from predators and call for backup with heavy weapons." Jake glanced at his alien roommate, then back at the shadow beast. "Where I come from, we live alongside predators. We don't always run from them. Sometimes you have to face them and show them you're not afraid." The shadow beast made a low rumbling sound, almost like a cat purring. It was a sound of contentment, something that none of the alien students had ever heard from such a dangerous creature. The beast was actually enjoying this interaction with Jake. Lisa and Ryan approached cautiously, their faces showing a mixture of pride and concern for their friend. They had grown up on Earth too, but neither of them had Jake's experience with large animals. "Are you hurt?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake checked himself quickly. He had a few scratches from the creature's claws, but nothing serious. "I'm fine. The important thing is that everyone else is safe." Professor Thankol began to circle the pair, studying them from every angle. His scientific mind was struggling to process what he was witnessing. The creature's stress levels have dropped to almost normal ranges. Its heart rate is stable, and it's showing none of the aggressive behaviors typical of shadow beasts in captivity. The shadow beast turned its attention to the professor, and Jake saw the creature's eyes narrow slightly. It did not like being studied so closely, and its instincts were telling it to view the circling behavior as a potential threat. "Professor," Jake said carefully, "you might want to keep your distance. It's still evaluating everyone here, and it doesn't understand your intentions." But Professor Thankol was too fascinated by his readings to heed the warning. He moved closer, his instruments beeping as they recorded the creature's vital signs. The shadow beast's rumbling stopped, and it began to rise from its sitting position. "I think you should back away," Jake said more urgently. "It's getting nervous again." The professor finally looked up from his instruments and saw the shadow beast's changed posture. The creature was no longer relaxed, and its glowing eyes were fixed on the professor with obvious suspicion. Jake stepped between them, placing himself once again in the path of potential danger. "It's okay," he said, addressing the shadow beast directly. "He's not a threat, he's just curious like you are." The creature's eyes shifted to Jake, and its aggressive posture softened slightly. But it continued to watch the professor with obvious wariness. "Perhaps we should reactivate the containment systems," Professor Thankol suggested, his voice slightly shaken by the creature's reaction to him. "No," Jake said firmly. "That's what caused this problem in the first place." The creature was frustrated and angry because it was trapped in a small space with artificial stimulation. "It needs room to move and time to calm down." The shadow beast seemed to understand that Jake was defending it, and it moved closer to the human. Not in an aggressive way, but in the manner of a large dog seeking comfort from its owner. Jake reached out and gently scratched behind the creature's ears, the same way he would comfort a nervous horse. The shadow beast leaned into the touch, its eyes closing slightly with pleasure. The alien students gasped at this display of affection between human and predator. In their experience, such interactions were impossible. Predators killed prey, they did not form emotional bonds with them. Incredible, Professor Thane cold-breathed. The creature is displaying pack-bonding behaviors. It has accepted the human as its alpha leader. Commander Zethnok suddenly appeared at the entrance to the laboratory, accompanied by several security officers. They had come in response to the emergency alarms, expecting to find carnage and destruction. Instead, they found a peaceful scene that challenged everything they thought they knew about predator behavior. "What is the situation, Professor?" the commander asked, his hand resting on his weapon but not drawing it. "The containment system failed," Professor Thane Cole explained. "The shadow beast escaped, but Cadet Murphy managed to subdue it without weapons or technology. The creature appears to have bonded with him." Commander Zethnok's large eyes studied the scene with obvious disbelief. A human cadet subdued a shadow beast with his bare hands? "It wasn't about subduing it," Jake said, still keeping his voice calm and steady. "It was about understanding it. The creature was scared and confused, not evil. It just needed someone to show it that it wasn't alone." The shadow beast rubbed its massive head against Jake's shoulder, a gesture of affection that left no doubt about the bond that had formed between them. The creature trusted this human completely, something that should have been impossible according to all known science. "The readings are extraordinary," Professor Thane Cole continued. "The creature's stress hormones have dropped to levels we've never recorded before. Its brain activity shows patterns associated with contentment and social bonding. This could revolutionize our understanding of predator psychology." Commander Zethnok approached slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. "What do you recommend?" "We do with the creature now, Professor," Jake answered before the professor could speak. "It needs a better habitat, somewhere with more space and natural light, and it needs regular interaction with intelligent beings. Shadow beasts are pack animals, they're not meant to be kept in isolation." The shadow beast looked up at Jake with obvious intelligence, as if it understood the conversation and approved of his suggestions. The creature's behavior was more like that of a domesticated animal than a wild predator. "This is unprecedented," Professor Thane Cole said. "We will need to completely revise our protocols for handling dangerous specimens. The human approach appears to be far more effective than our traditional methods." Word of Jake's encounter with the shadow beast spread throughout the academy within hours. Students and faculty from every department came to hear the story of the human, who had tamed a galactic predator with nothing but courage and understanding. Jake found himself somewhat embarrassed by all the attention. To him, what he had done was not extraordinary, just the natural result of growing up around animals. But to the alien students, it was proof that humans possessed abilities that no other species had developed. "You have changed everything," Klixvar said that evening as they sat in their dormitory room. "The other students are calling you the Beast Whisperer and the Predator Tamer. Some of them think you have magical powers." Jake laughed at that. "It's not magic, Klix, it's just understanding. Animals aren't so different from people. They want to feel safe and understood. They want to know they're not alone." "But how did you know the shadow beast would not kill you?" his roommate asked. "By all logic, you should have been its first victim." Jake thought about the question seriously. "I guess I could see that it wasn't really a killer. It was just a frightened animal that had been pushed too far. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking creatures are just the ones who are most afraid." The next day brought news that would change Jake's life forever. The Galactic Federation had heard about the incident and wanted to study human methods of predator interaction. Jake was being offered a position as a special advisor on dangerous species management. But more importantly, the shadow beast's situation had improved dramatically. A new habitat was being constructed with Jake's input, designed to meet the creature's natural needs rather than simply containing it. The beast would have space to roam, natural light, and regular interaction with trained handlers. You have given us a new perspective on predator behavior, Professor Thingcole said as Jake prepared to leave the laboratory for the last time.